The Carter family just wanted a peaceful weekend away, a simple vacation by the lake. But from the moment they arrived in the small southern town, something felt off. The stares, the silence, the tension. Then came the sheriff's deputies, accusing them of trespassing without a shred of evidence. Within minutes things escalated, and David Carter, a father of two, was handcuffed in front of his children, all because of the color of his skin. But the officers made one crucial mistake. They didn't know David was a federal FBI agent. What started as an act of racial profiling would soon unravel into a full-blown investigation, and the cops were about to learn the hard way what happens when you mess with the wrong man. The Carter family was finally taking a break. For months, David Carter had been juggling a demanding job, long hours, and the emotional weight that came with his work in federal law enforcement. As a senior FBI agent, he had seen the worst of humanity, cases that kept him up at night, crime scenes that stuck in his mind long after the reports were closed. But this weekend was just about family. His wife, Monica, had been the one to push for the trip. "You need a break, David," she'd said, one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner. "We all do. Let's go somewhere quiet, just us and the kids." So they packed their SUV with snacks, fishing poles, board games, and an overstuffed cooler full of sandwiches, sodas, and Monica's famous potato salad. Jasmine, their 15-year-old daughter, brought her camera and sketch pad. Tyler, 11, carried a backpack filled with comic books, a slingshot, and his well-worn baseball glove. Their destination was a small lake town in the deep south, a place Monica had found online that promised scenic views, hiking trails, and cozy cabin rentals. It seemed perfect, remote enough to escape the noise, but close enough for a weekend trip. The drive down was uneventful at first. Country roads stretched endlessly between hills and fields, with old barns and mailboxes that leaned just a little too far to the side. David had the windows down, the warm spring air rushing in as soul music played on the radio. They sang along, they laughed, they played I Spy, and took turns choosing songs. For a moment, everything felt normal, light, free, but as they entered the town limits, the energy shifted. It started subtly, a change in how people looked at them as they drove past. The kind of look David knew all too well, not curiosity, but judgment. Fear disguised as suspicion. He didn't say anything, didn't want to ruin the mood. Monica noticed too, but she just gave his hand a squeeze and smiled at the kids, determined to stay positive. They pulled into the only gas station in town, a small dusty stop with one pump and a rusted sign that squeaked in the wind. David got out to fill up, while Monica and the kids stretched their legs. That's when they felt it, the stares. A man in a pickup truck froze mid-pump, his eyes narrowing. A woman nearby locked her car doors and looked away. A clerk peered out from the window inside the station, his mouth slightly open. It wasn't just curiosity, it was discomfort, distrust, like the Carters had wandered into a place where they didn't belong. David stayed calm. He'd been in far worse situations, undercover assignments, hostile takedowns, high-stakes interrogations, but this was different. This wasn't a criminal operation or a sting. This was supposed to be a break, a vacation. He glanced across the parking lot and saw Jasmine and Tyler looking around, their smiles fading a little. Jasmine was pulling her hoodie up. Tyler stopped bouncing his baseball on the ground. Monica met David's eyes. She didn't have to say anything. He knew what she was thinking. Still, he smiled at his children. "Everything's fine," he said, his voice even. "Let's get some snacks for the cabin." Inside, the tension followed them like a shadow. The clerk didn't greet them. No one said a word. The silence was louder than any insult. David paid in cash, kept his tone polite, and ushered his family back into the SUV. As they pulled away from the station, he caught sight of a sheriff's cruiser parked across the road. The deputy inside was watching them through dark sunglasses, chewing something slowly, like he was sizing them up. He didn't move, just watched. "Do you think they're going to follow us?" Jasmine asked from the back seat, her voice barely above a whisper. David didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road. "We're just here to enjoy the weekend," he said calmly. "That's all." But inside, the switch had flipped. His instincts were awake. His training kicked in. The vacation might still go on, but David Carter was no longer just a dad in weekend mode. What the town didn't know was that the man they were profiling, the man they thought they could intimidate, wasn't just any tourist. He was an elite FBI agent, trained to read danger before it unfolded, and now he was watching them. This weekend might have started with rest in mind, but something told him this town had other plans. The morning sun shimmered over the lake like glass, birds chirped in the trees above. The sound of Tyler's laughter echoed as he chased a dragonfly near the edge of the water, while Jasmine sketched the peaceful landscape in her notebook. Monica laid out a red checkered blanket, placing sandwiches, juice boxes, and a bowl of fresh fruit in the center. It was everything they'd hoped for, quiet, beautiful, and peaceful. David leaned back in his folding chair, sunglasses on, breathing in the crisp morning air. "This," he said with a sigh, "is exactly what we needed." For a while it was perfect. The Carters ate, joked, and tossed a frisbee near the water. It felt like a scene from a postcard. Until the sound of gravel crunching under tires interrupted the moment. A sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly down the dirt road behind them, its tires kicking up dust. It came to a stop just a few feet from their picnic setup. The doors didn't open right away. The family froze, eyes cautiously following the movement. Then with a long creak, the driver's door opened. Out stepped Deputy Harlan, mid-50s, tall and broad-shouldered with a sun-reddened face. His expression was flat, unreadable, but his eyes scanned the Carter family like he was looking for trouble. His hand casually rested on the grip of his holstered sidearm. "You folks lost?" he asked, his tone sharp, his eyes not leaving David. David stood slowly, maintaining eye contact, his hands relaxed and clearly visible. "No sir," he replied calmly. "Just enjoying a little breakfast by the lake with my family." Harlan gave a short, skeptical grunt. "This area's for residents only. Didn't you see the sign?" David glanced around. "There weren't any signs near the trail we came through. We parked at the public lot. Still gonna need you to pack it up. Locals don't like strangers hanging around back here." David kept his tone level. "We're just visiting. Didn't realize this was restricted. Can I ask what ordinance we're violating?" Harlan's jaw tightened, clearly not used to being questioned. Before he could answer, the static crackle of a radio interrupted them. Harlan turned slightly and responded with a curt 10 minutes later, a second cruiser pulled up, then a third. Now 3 officers stood in a half-circle around the Carters. One rested his hand on his belt. Another started walking slowly around the picnic area, looking at the car, the food, even the kids' belongings, as if trying to find something, anything to justify their presence. Monica stepped closer to Jasmine and Tyler, pulling them gently behind her. Jasmine, already suspicious, quietly slipped her phone out of her pocket and began filming. She whispered to her mom, "Why are they acting like we did something wrong?" David raised his voice slightly, not in anger, but to assert authority. "Officers, we've complied. We're not causing any harm. My children are here. I'd like to understand what exactly we're being accused of." One of the deputies muttered, "Suspicious behavior." Another added, "You're trespassing. Could be casing the area." Casing the area. David repeated, "We're having breakfast." But logic didn't seem to matter. Harlan stepped forward, his voice cold. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." David's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me, you heard me." Monica gasped, stepping forward. "He didn't do anything. Our kids are right here." But before anyone could stop it, Harlan had his cuffs out. David didn't resist. He raised his hands calmly, knowing escalation would only put his family in more danger. Clink, clink. The metallic snap of the handcuffs echoed over the quiet lake. Tyler started crying. Jasmine's hands shook as she kept filming. Monica stood frozen, her voice trembling. "You're arresting a father in front of his children. For what?" Harlan didn't answer. As David stood there, restrained and silent, he looked down at his children. His jaw clenched, but his voice remained steady. "It's okay, kids. I need you to stay calm. Everything's going to be all right." Inside, David wasn't calm. He was calculating, thinking, watching. These officers had no idea who he was. No idea what mistake they were making. And when they found out, they'd regret ever setting foot near his family. The morning sun shimmered over the lake like glass. Birds chirped in the trees above. The sound of Tyler's laughter echoed as he chased a dragonfly near the edge of the water, while Jasmine sketched the peaceful landscape in her notebook. Monica laid out a red checkered blanket, placing sandwiches, juice boxes, and a bowl of fresh fruit in the center. It was everything they'd hoped for, quiet, beautiful, and peaceful. David leaned back in his folding chair, sunglasses on, breathing in the crisp morning air. "This," he said with a sigh, "is exactly what we needed." For a while it was perfect. The Carters ate, joked, and tossed a frisbee near the water. It felt like a scene from a postcard. Until the sound of gravel crunching under tires interrupted the moment. A sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly down the dirt road behind them, its tires kicking up dust. It came to a stop just a few feet from their picnic setup. The doors didn't open right away. The family froze, eyes cautiously following the movement. Then with a long creak, the driver's door opened. Out stepped Deputy Harlan, mid-50s, tall and broad-shouldered with a sun-reddened face. His expression was flat, unreadable, but his eyes scanned the Carter family like he was looking for trouble. His hand casually rested on the grip of his holstered sidearm. "You folks lost?" he asked, his tone sharp, his eyes not leaving Dave. David stood slowly, maintaining eye contact, his hands relaxed and clearly visible. "No sir," he replied calmly. "Just enjoying a little breakfast by the lake with my family." Harlan gave a short, skeptical grunt. "This area's for residents only. Didn't you see the sign?" David glanced around. There weren't any signs near the trail we came through. We parked at the public lot. "Still gonna need you to pack it up. Locals don't like strangers hanging around back here." David kept his tone level. "We're just visiting. Didn't realize this was restricted. Can I ask what ordinance we're violating?" Harlan's jaw tightened, clearly not used to being questioned. Before he could answer, the static crackle of a radio interrupted them. Harlan turned slightly and responded with a curt 10-4. Minutes later, a second cruiser pulled up, then a third. Now 3 officers stood in a half-circle around the Carters. One rested his hand on his belt, another started walking slowly around the picnic area, looking at the car, the food, even the kids' belongings, as if trying to find something, anything to justify their presence. Monica stepped closer to Jasmine and Tyler, pulling them gently behind her. Jasmine, already suspicious, quietly slipped her phone out of her pocket and began filming. She whispered to her mom, "Why are they acting like we did something wrong?" David raised his voice slightly, not in anger, but to assert authority. "Officers, we've complied. We're not causing any harm. My children are here. I'd like to understand what exactly we're being accused of." One of the deputies muttered, "Suspicious behavior." Another added, "You're trespassing. Could be casing the area." "Casing the area." David repeated, "We're having breakfast." But logic didn't seem to matter. Harlan stepped forward, his voice cold. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." David's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Monica gasped, stepping forward. "He didn't do anything. Our kids are right here." But before anyone could stop it, Harlan had his cuffs out. David didn't resist. He raised his hands calmly, knowing escalation would only put his family in more danger. Clink. Click. The metallic snap of the handcuffs echoed over the quiet lake. Tyler started crying. Jasmine's hands shook as she kept filming. Monica stood frozen, her voice trembling. "You're arresting a father in front of his children. For what?" Harlan didn't answer. As David stood there, restrained and silent, he looked down at his children. His jaw clenched, but his voice remained steady. "It's okay, kids. I need you to stay calm. Everything's going to be all right." Inside, David wasn't calm. He was calculating, thinking. Watch. These officers had no idea who he was, no idea what mistake they were making, and when they found out, they'd regret ever setting foot near his family. The moment the Carters stepped out of the sheriff's office, Jasmine pulled out her phone. Her hands were still shaking, but her mind was clear. She opened the video app, selected the clip she had recorded at the lake, the officers approaching, the harsh words, her father being handcuffed in front of her brother, and hit upload. She gave the video a simple but powerful title, "Arrested for Being Black on Vacation." Within 20 minutes, it had over 10,000 views. In an hour, it passed 100,000. By sunset it was trending nationally. Monica stood beside her daughter as the notifications poured in, likes, shares, outraged comments. People were tagging civil rights groups, journalists, and public officials. Hashtags like Gen Justice for the Carters and While Black began to take over Twitter. Someone even created a TikTok remix of the sheriff's office sign with the word "protect" crossed out. Inside the sheriff's department, panic set in. The sheriff, once calm and dismissive, was now pacing behind his desk, red-faced and sweating through his collar. A cluster of deputies stood nearby, silent and tense. Deputy Harlan sat in the corner, staring at the floor, the weight of his actions slowly sinking. "We need to issue a statement," the sheriff said, rubbing his temples. One of the officers replied, "Sir, Local news stations are already outside. They want to know why a federal agent was illegally detained. The sheriff looked out the window. Media vans were pulling up outside. Reporters were setting up cameras, and microphones were being tested. A drone hovered in the air, filming the building from above. In desperation, the sheriff called a press conference. "We had a complaint about a suspicious vehicle," he told the crowd, blinking against the flash of camera. "We were acting on what we believed to be a legitimate concern." But his voice wavered. His hands trembled. He didn't sound convincing, even to himself. A reporter from Atlanta News Channel 5 raised her hand. "Sheriff, the family's daughter posted a video that shows your officers handcuffing an innocent man without reading him his rights. How do you explain that?" The sheriff cleared his throat. "It's being looked into. It may not tell the full story." He had no idea how wrong he was, because David Carter had one more card to play. Back at the rental cabin, David opened a small encrypted case he had brought with him, just in case. Inside was a compact FBI-issued body cam, which he had clipped to the inside of his jacket during the arrest. Though off-duty, David had made it a habit to wear it whenever traveling through rural areas. Experience had taught him that some towns operated by their own rules, and that truth was only as strong as the evidence you could back it up with. He uploaded the footage to a secure drive, and then forwarded it to his field office, his legal team, and several journalists he had worked with over the years. Within an hour, unedited body cam footage of the entire encounter was broadcast on cable news. From the moment the first deputy approached, to the false accusations, the refusal to ask for ID, the handcuffs, and even Harlan's mocking tone inside the sheriff's office, the footage spoke for itself. The backlash was immediate. Civil rights attorneys went live on Instagram demanding action. Activists called for the resignation of the sheriff and the firing of all officers involved. The town's mayor, who had initially stayed silent, released a hurried statement that evening. "We are deeply disturbed by the treatment of the Carter family. An internal investigation is underway. We will cooperate fully with federal authorities." But that wasn't enough to stop the flood. Protesters began gathering outside the sheriff's department. Not just locals, people drove in from neighboring counties and even states. They held signs that read, "Being black isn't a crime," and "Justice for the Carters now." Social media platforms were flooded with support, from celebrities to politicians. Donations poured into legal aid funds. Inside the sheriff's office, the PR team scrambled to contain the disaster, but the truth was already out there, and truth doesn't go away. The department had not only humiliated a federal agent and his family, they had been caught on multiple cameras doing it, and as David watched the news coverage from the couch of their cabin, Monica beside him, Jasmine and Tyler finally resting, he whispered, "They thought they could bury us, but they didn't know we'd already pressed record." By the time the Carters returned home, the story had gone national, and not just for a news cycle. Headlines continued for days. FBI agent illegally detained while on family vacation, caught on camera, racial profiling in broad daylight, and sheriff's department under fire after civil rights scandal. David hadn't wanted the attention. He would have preferred a quiet resolution, maybe even a personal apology, but this wasn't about personal apologies anymore. This was bigger. Within a week, the FBI's Internal Affairs Division launched a formal investigation, not just into David's detainment, but into the entire sheriff's department's conduct. The Department of Justice sent down civil rights attorneys. Federal oversight officers visited the town. The pressure was on, and it was unrelenting. Deputy Harlan was the first to fall. After reviewing both Jasmine's video and David's body cam footage, the state attorney general filed preliminary charges against Harlan and 2 other deputies. The charges included unlawful detainment, misconduct in public office, racial profiling, and abuse of authority. Harlan was placed on unpaid administrative leave, and eventually resigned before formal termination could take place. The sheriff, clinging to his title, tried to distance himself. "It was a misunderstanding," he told the media. "Poor communication, overreaction," but no one bought. Protesters still gathered outside the department. Citizens who had remained quiet about their own run-ins with law enforcement suddenly came forward, telling similar stories, some from just weeks before, stories that had been ignored, suppressed, buried. Not anymore. By the end of the month, the town council voted unanimously to remove the sheriff from office. He was escorted out of the building he had worked in for decades, without ceremony, without a goodbye. Change didn't stop there. A new interim chief was brought in, this time from a neighboring city with a strong record in community policing. The department was put under external review,
Mandatory body cams were issued to all officers, along with new policies on civilian interaction, de-escalation and implicit bias training. The town established a civilian oversight board, a group of local residents, activists, and former law enforcement officers, to review complaints and policies moving forward. The town had learned its lesson the hard way. As for David, he returned to work at the FBI's Atlanta field office. After taking a few extra days off, his supervisor had been supportive, calling him directly during the height of the ordeal. Still, something had shifted in David. He wasn't shaken, but he was changed. In his first public interview, sitting in front of flashing cameras and reporters, he spoke not as a federal agent, but as a black man, a father, and a citizen. "This isn't just about my family," he said firmly. "It's about the families who never had the chance to fight back. I had connections, I had training, but imagine what would have happened if I didn't. How many others are silenced because they didn't have a camera, a platform or someone who would listen?" The clip of that interview was shared across the internet, praised for its honesty and gravity. Civil rights groups reached out to thank him. School teachers used it in classrooms. A senator quoted him in a speech on police reform. The Carters tried to return to normal, though normal had a new definition now. Jasmine became more vocal about social justice in her high school, even starting a media club focused on truth in reporting. Tyler, still young, asked questions about why people treated them differently. David and Monica answered honestly, with compassion, but never sugarcoated the truth. And when it was time for another family vacation months later, they chose Hawaii, somewhere far from the memories of that small town. Palm trees, ocean waves and peace. No patrol cars, no questions, no fear. But one thing was different. David packed his badge and wore it around his neck every time they left the hotel. Not for power, not for pride, but as a reminder that justice sometimes needs proof, that even an innocent picnic can turn into a national headline, that silence is never the answer, and that the next time someone thinks they can violate a person's rights based on skin color alone, there will be consequences. The Carter family's story is a chilling reminder that racism doesn't always hide in dark corners or distant corners of society. Sometimes it wears a badge, carries a gun, and hides behind the shield of authority. It is an uncomfortable truth that racism exists within institutions that are meant to protect, serve, and uphold justice. And as the Carters discovered, it can be both covert and aggressive, masking itself under the guise of authority, while targeting innocent families simply because of the color of their skin. What began as a peaceful vacation, a much-needed break from the stress of everyday life, quickly turned into a terrifying ordeal that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of their trust in the system. A family out enjoying the day, minding their own business, suddenly found themselves at the mercy of officers, who saw them not as innocent civilians, but as suspects, without cause, without evidence, simply because they didn't fit the narrow biased view of what a criminal looked like in that town. But David Carter wasn't just any father. He was an off-duty FBI agent. He knew his rights, he understood the power of evidence, and he had the foresight to document the entire ordeal. He had the knowledge, the power, and ultimately, the proof to fight back against the injustice unfolding before him and his family. In the face of humiliation, fear, and uncertainty, David kept his cool. He turned the tide of the story from one of victimhood to one of triumph, not just for his own family, but for anyone who's ever felt powerless in the face of systemic oppression. His actions, both in the moment and afterward, brought a national spotlight to the issue of racial profiling and law enforcement misconduct, forcing an entire community to confront its own biases and flaws. But as much as David's knowledge and bravery played a critical role, his story also underscores a painful reality. Not every family has the power or the resources to fight back. For every David Carter, there are countless families who don't have the training, the connections, or the evidence to expose the truth. There are parents who face the same unjust treatment, the same harassment, without the ability to defend themselves or their loved one. This is the silent injustice many experience on a daily basis, and it's why David's story isn't just about one man standing up. It's about what happens when we all stand up. It's about shining a light on the darkness that often hides in plain sight, and demanding accountability from those in positions of power. It's about recognizing that justice cannot be selective, that the protection of rights cannot be a privilege reserved for those with influence or resource. The Carters were fortunate. They had the chance to fight back, and they won. But the fight doesn't end with them. Every time we witness or hear about a case of racial injustice, we must ask ourselves what we are doing to make sure it doesn't happen again. Whether through social media, community action, or supporting policy changes, we each have a role to play in bringing about the kind of justice that doesn't just protect the few, but the many. When we stand together and demand change, that is when the real work of justice begins. David Carter's story is a victory, but it is also a call to action. It serves as a reminder that we cannot be passive in the face of injustice. We must continue to raise our voices, fight for accountability, and ensure that no one, regardless of their race, their background, or their status, has to endure what the Carters did that day, because justice should never be optional. If this story moved you, share it, because silence only protects the guilty. When we stay quiet in the face of injustice, we're allowing it to continue unchecked. Every time we choose to speak out, to amplify the voices of those who've been silenced, we're sending a powerful message. We will not stand by while others suffer. By sharing this story, you're helping to ensure that we're holding those in power accountable, that we're not letting the truth slip through the cracks. Justice starts with awareness. If you believe in justice, like this video, and spread the message. Liking isn't just about numbers, it's about showing that we stand together for what's right. It's about telling the world that racial profiling, abuse of power, and systemic injustice will not be tolerated. Every like represents a commitment to doing better, to pushing for the kind of world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. We also want to hear from you. Comment your thoughts below, and let us know if you've ever experienced or witnessed something similar. Your voice matters. Sharing your stories helps raise awareness and opens up a larger conversation about the injustices that still happen today. By engaging in these conversations, we begin to break the silence that allows injustice to thrive. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories that expose the truth and shine a light on issues that deserve our attention. This channel is about more than just entertainment. It's about education, awareness, and change. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay aware, stay united, and always stand up for what's right. The fight for justice continues, and it starts with us.